So my recommendation here is that after d5, you played f3. This is known as the fantasy variation. So I played g4, I won a piece in 8 moves, and that was kind of easy, considering this guy is 1700. If you're aggressive and you don't like to get this lane positions from the Caro Kann, I think this approach works. It's gonna work pretty well. Welcome to Premium Chess Coaching, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to play it against the Caro Kann, how to beat Caro Kann players. I know this is going to be very important for you because if you play d4, you're going to encounter the Caro Kann. You're going to play it against the Caro Kann. That is a fact. And nowadays there's a lot of content out there on how to play the Caro Kann. If you can start gaining more points against the Caro, I mean, that's going to represent at least 100, 200 rating points for you this year if you can learn how to play it against the Caro Kann. This is the same exact thing I do against the Caro Kann and also the stuff I teach my students. Okay, so first of all, before we dive in, what's my approach against the Caro Kann, I want to teach you what is the psychology of the Caro Kann player. So when someone plays the Caro Kann, he expects this type of setup, right? There are 3 common options for white. You can play pawn to e5, that's an option. You can take, that's called the exchange variation. And also you can play knight c3, which is also very, very popular, right? Knight c3. So they have in common one idea, which is, for example, if you play pawn to e5, let's see this from Black's perspective. Black plays bishop f5, and then he continues with e6. At some point, he can play c5. But first, they develop the bishop, right? Every Caro Kann player prefers to play with the bishop out. Same happens if you play knight c3, right? Because usually black takes here and then bishop f5. And once again, I mean, the bishop goes outside the pawn structure. After knight g3, black usually plays bishop g6, and then black continues with the pawn to e6. But every time black plays e6, the light square bishop is out. And from there, Caro Kann players study the rest. The middle game ideas, the plans, stuff like that. Same happens if you, for example, take the exchange variation. Let's say you play knight c3. This bishop can go to f5. And again, black is going to try d6, knight here, bishop e7, or bishop d6, knight c6, short castle. And the game continues this way. But what is the common pattern? Black always play bishop f5 and then pawn to e6. That's something that happens over and over again. And the typical Caro Kann player from a 500 rating to 2000 rating, that's how they play the most of their games, okay? So what happens when you play that way? You play as white, you put your opponent into situations where he already knows what to do, which is not bad. Those openings are very good, okay? But my recommendation, so you can make things more simple for you, and that's something that I also teach to my students, and it's working pretty well, is that let's confuse Caro Kann players, okay? Let's make the entire setup a little bit more difficult. So my recommendation here is that after d5, you played f3. This is known as the fantasy variation. And I would say that below 2000, this is one of the best approaches against Caro Kann players. Because think about it. Think about the development for black. You know that you need to develop the rest of your pieces, right? For example, you need to castle. So in order to castle, you need to develop the knight and the bishop, especially this bishop. So if you want to develop this bishop, you might try d6. But if you try d6, your bishop is inside. And that goes against the principles the Caro Kann players study. But they're like, wait a second. If he plays f3 and I take, he's going to take back. And now what am I going to do with my bishop? Because I can't play bishop f5. That is the logic. All right. The logic is like to create some confusion in your opponent's mind. All right. Now, I mean, if black knows the theory, black has other alternatives to play. But oftentimes, what I find in my games, again, especially against people who are below 2000, is that people start disorienting themselves. They don't know how to find the best way of developing. And what I'm going to show you some examples of games, real games I played, against different people in different parts of their journey, different ratings, where I use this idea, and I'm going to show you how I play these games. And you'll see, you'll see how I use this idea with good results. So you can start implementing this in your games. So this first game is a game I played against a 1700 player. By the way, what I did is I created a new account and I started like doing like a little bit of a speed run, so I could try these ideas against low rated players and see what works below 2000. So essentially, what I did is I played e4, c6, d4, d5, and I played f3. This guy, who is a 1700 player, we can say he has some experience. He played the move knight d7. Okay, that move already blocks the bishop. So if I want, I can play pawn to e5, and now I can play some variation of the advanced line, but with the difference that he cannot respond with bishop f5. So what I want to do is I want to limit the options of this bishop, because I want to take my opponent into different ground, a different battleground where he doesn't know what to do. Okay, or maybe he's going to think about what to do with his development, because that's when most blunders happen. Usually blunders happen when you don't know what to do, and instead of thinking proactively on your position, you're thinking from zero in a position that you don't know what to do. You're like, let me try this, let me try that, and you're not really sure about what's going on, and you want to take your opponents to that path, basically. After 97, I play pawn to c4. If he takes, I'm going to take with my bishop. Instead, he played the move knight d f6. Okay? Oh, sorry. He played the other knight to f6, which is a mistake because now, again, I can play e5. e5 was a move I really, really needed to play. I didn't do it, but e5 is a really nice move. And the difference between playing e5 here and e5 from the beginning in the Caro Kann is that if I play e5 right now, he plays bishop f5, and then we're going to play this setup where he can develop the bishop quickly. But in my game, if we delay this and we successfully make him to play the knight to d7, he blocks his bishop, and we take our opponent into a situation where he doesn't know what to do. So after this, when he played e6, finally, no, first I played bishop e3, I continue with my development, and at some point I was like, yeah, now it's the time to play pawn to e5. But, the moment he played pawn to e6, I was like, yeah, that's this on itself is a victory in the opening, because you're going to play with your bishop inside of your pawn structure. And I can guarantee you that most Caro Kann players will feel uncomfortable with this approach, okay? Because they don't know what to do with the bishop inside. Because their whole plan, their whole system in the middle game depends on having the bishop out. So this already can put your opponent into a very difficult position. The fact that you force him to be like, you know what, I need to develop my bishop, so let's play pawn to e6, and he gives up on the idea of developing the bishop to develop this bishop, that's a good result. And here again, I had to play pawn to e5. I didn't do it. Now I know that's a very important move I have to do. He played bishop before, I played e5, and now I'm getting some space advantage. What happened from here is that he had to move the knight. He played knight h5, and then I simply realized, okay, his knight doesn't have anywhere to go, right? So I simply play pawn to g4, and the knight is trapped. Whatever he does, the knight is going to be taken. If he plays queen h4 check, for example, I have bishop f2. And, I mean, now the queen is under attack, the knight is under attack. And notice that, again, after g4, the knight doesn't have anywhere to go. Now, this guy is a 1700 guy. This guy knows that he doesn't have to blunder, right? But again, understand this. Blunders happen in unknown situations, when you are exposed to situations where you don't feel comfortable, where you don't know really what to do, when you don't really know what's going on. Because now you're playing a new game, like a game where you don't have a reference and you need to find your answers. And I would say that most people don't know how to handle these situations. So I played g4, I won a piece in 8 moves, and that was kind of easy, considering this guy is 1700. So let's take a look at a different example. Okay, this is another game I played against another 1700 player, and e4, c6, d4, d5, I played f3. And here my opponent, I think he got confused because he played the move pawn to c5. That move is just a mistake. Pawn to c5 is a move that works well against the advanced variation. Okay, against this specific move, c5 is a pawn sacrifice you can try. This is part of the opening theory, okay? But against f3, it doesn't work the same because you're just hanging a pawn. What I did here is I captured the pawn on c5, he took my pawn, and then I went for a queen trade. Yeah. And just like that, I got a position with a free pawn. And on the only thing I need to do from here is to trade some material. He played knight c6, I played knight bishop e3, bishop e4, and then I continue it with my development. Bishop e2, bishop takes, knight g2, rook d8, short castle, and I have a very nice position. Mostly because when you train the Caro Kann, you don't expect to lose a pawn this easily, you know? So yeah, he tricked himself. The reason why I'm teaching you this approach against the Caro Kann is because you increase the chances of your opponent to trick himself because he's going to play in a position that is unknown to him. You know, most people are like, okay, I develop my bishop, my last square bishop, and then I figure out. But with f3, the story is different. Okay, it's completely different. And in the next example, what I'm going to show you is what happens if your opponent starts playing a bit better, you know, if he knows the opening theory, what to do. Okay, in this other game, this was a game against a 1500 player. I played f3. He took, because taking the pawn is the main line. Okay, so taking the pawn is the main line. But here, the most important move for black is e5. Black needs to play the move pawn to e5. What happened in my game is that black played the move knight f6. And that move allows you to play pawn to e5 already. This is the move you have to make, pawn to e5. That way, you gain more space. If the knight goes here, for example, then you have pawn to c4. And then after knight here and bishop e3, white has a very nice position. It's true that your opponent can play bishop f5 now. Yeah, finally. But at what cost? At the cost of giving away all the space. You know, because usually when black plays the move bishop f5, black has an important pawn on d5. And that small difference is going to make your game as white much easier. So for example, you can continue with knight c3. Let's say he goes pawn to e6, you can play knight f3. Every move is pretty much very easy to find. Bishop e3, bishop takes, queen takes, short castle. And here, for example, given this pawn structure, you can try long castle and then knight e5. And you're going to get a very nice position against your opponent. Very nice position. Just so you see an example, right? Let's say knight bd7, you have knight g5, attacking h7, maybe g6, but then h4. And this is going to be very nasty. Very nasty. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because, again, in the fantasy variation after pawn to f3 and d takes, e takes, here your opponent has to play pawn to e5. He has to play pawn to e5. If he tries knight f6, or if he tries pawn to e6, or weird stuff like that, you are going to get a very nice position, you know? And here, most people is going to play d5. According to my database, if you take a look at this area, you know, on the right, most people play d5 in this position. But the second move, most played move, with almost 1 million games, people play knight f6, which is a mistake because you can play d5. And the third most popular move is pawn to e6. Another bad move because the bishop is inside. And I want you to pay attention to how much, like how many times white wins in this type of positions. In case that you don't know how to read these metrics, 62% of the time, white wins here, which is a big margin, okay? And, you know, a lot of people play d6 because they don't really know what to do. Now, how to handle people that know the move pawn to e5? Okay, in my experience, so something that I did last month is I created a new account and I took that account from 0 to 2000, okay? So in my experience, playing against many defenses, I only encounter 4 to 6 games where people play d5 because most people actually below 2000 didn't know this response. My recommendation against e5, which is the book move, this is called the Maroczy variation, by the way, is knight f3, attacking the pawn. And yeah, you're gonna play this line almost like a gambit because you could always take on e5, but please don't do that. If you take on e5, you're gonna make a massive mistake. If you take this pawn, then your opponent is playing queen h4 check, and now you're in trouble, in big trouble. So what you gotta do here is you need to play knight f3. Okay. Now, what happens if your opponent takes a pawn? You don't care. You don't care about the pawn. Actually, taking the pawn is a mistake. It's a mistake that happens quite often because then you can play bishop c4, and now you are going to create tons of pressure on f7. It's not going to be easy for him to handle this, you know? Actually, knight f6 is a very common move here that you can castle. You don't care about your pawns, by the way. Taking on e4 would be a huge mistake after knight e5. There's a bunch of attack on f7. And what else can he try? Bishop c5 makes more sense because there are d3 checks and, stuff like that. But then knight g5. And now you add pressure on f7. If he castles, you still can play bishop f7. Rook takes, knight takes, king takes, and pawn to e5 gets you a huge advantage. It's important that you learn this. So rewatch this, practice this. But again, like in this specific position, remember that d takes e4 is a mistake. Not because you're going to take this pawn. You couldn't care less about that pawn. It's because you're going to establish a pressure on f7, and that pressure is going to appear very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. So no, most people are not going to take on d4. I'm going to show you what happened if one of my games. This is a game I played against a 1900 player, okay? And this is when I was almost finishing my challenge, when I was almost reaching 2000. I played the fantasy variation, my opponent took, I took, he played e5, I played knight f3. But he didn't take on d4 because, pawn takes e4 is possible, but that's going to give you a very nice position. You will do this, short castle, and you're going to add pressure on f7. That's the plan. What he did instead is bishop d4, which makes sense. Again, every Caro Kann player is more keen to develop that bishop finally because he wants to, remove that bishop. But the reason why I love this position so much with white, it's because, again, the psychology of the black player as a Caro Kann is to play like a solid type of chess where he plays or builds up his position slowly. And most of the time, the center is not that open. But this position is aggressive. You're basically giving up the pawn on d4. In other variations, you can also give up the pawn on e4. So if you're a tactical player, if you're aggressive, and you don't like to get this lame positions from the Caro Kann, I think this approach is going to work pretty well. So again, after here, I just play bishop c4. And I'm teaching you this because it is a very, very common mistake I see all the time. I like the move bishop c4. I think it's very, very interesting. Another move is pawn to c3, which is it's more serious in the top level. But the move I really like is bishop c4. And look, if this works pretty well against 1900s, it's for a reason. I recommend you to play bishop c4 because here a very common move is a move knight f6, and this is a trap you need to know. Okay, against knight f6, what you gotta do is bishop takes f7. And the reason why it works so well in this specific variation is that after king takes, you have knight takes e5 check. And after he moves the king, then you simply take the bishop. King takes, in this case, take a look at this beautiful position, right? You are a pawn up, he cannot castle, and for sure this doesn't look like a successful result out of the opening. I won the game, I already have a +3 advantage, and I end up winning this game pretty easily. So again, my recommendation is like every time you want to learn a new opening, I recommend you to study the psychology of the side that you're going to face, right? And from there, try to find like plans that will make the game of your opponent more complicated. In the Caro Kann, for example, most people is very like, they don't want to think, they do whatever, and they play bishop f5 and then bishop e6, and you can step in and create some complications. If your opponent doesn't know the theory, you are going to create a big problem for them, for your opponents. So try this approach. Let me know how it works. And this is something that I have tested. This is something my students are testing. It's working pretty well. So try it. Give it a shot. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. And also, if you want to know more about my stuff as a chess coach, I have a website where I have all my previous paid master classes there, so you can watch them for free. The link is below. It's premiumchesscoaching.com/bolt. You can take a look and you can see all my stuff for free, so you can keep learning your chess, right? So this is it for today. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see my stuff. In the next videos, I want to keep talking about other openings from the psychology point of view, so you can make your opponents feel uncomfortable so they blunder sooner. See you in the next video.